Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another month's episode of Cloverhill Family Ministry Podcast. Welcome to May. What's going on in May, Brandy?
Right.
What's the big thing in May?
Mother's Day.
I'm
shout out. Super excited for Mother's Day.
Shout out to the moms.
Yes.
And we have a special guest today, right?
We do. I'm excited. I'm so excited about our guest today, Miss Angie Grant, the executive director of our Cloverhill Christian Academy.
Yeah.
A mother I've respected and looked up to for years. And so we're super excited you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
I've
thanks
been
for
looking
being
forward
here.
to this.
Oh, we're so glad to hear that. Us too. And so obviously, May, it's Mother's Day is this month. And so we wanted to take a minute and just talk about this month, specifically speaking, right? Because obviously motherhood and fatherhood are different. Both parents play a role in discipling their kids and bringing their kids along in their journey. And so this month and next month will do the same for dads. But for this episode, we wanted to focus specifically on, as a mom, just the role of discipleship, how to disciple, what it looks like to disciple as a mom, and from that perspective. And so really excited about this month's episode.
Yes.
I think it's going to be super beneficial. And really quick, I have to shout out my mom. She's awesome.
Yes.
And Alyssa,
Hi,
my wife,
Mom.
great mom too.
I actually met your mom, Charles.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
She was here.
Yeah, she
She
was.
came to her night.
She was very sweet. Came up and introduced herself.
Oh,
she
good.
was awesome.
That's so fun.
Great.
That's great. And so we got some questions we want to throw your way, Angie, and just unleash all your wisdom. You know, you got a lot on us.
Yes.
Okay, help us
I
out.
have a lot of years. I'm not sure about a lot of wisdom,
No,
but I have a lot
definitely
of
wisdom.
years behind
Definitely
me.
wisdom. And so as we get into this, I kind of want to start with this question. And so it's kind of a vague one. I know this can be the worst, but it gives you room to kind of, mess around and say what you need to say. But looking at, if you're to break it down into like official job description, right? So like moms are signing up for this job of discipling their kids. How would you kind of define or explain a mom's job description in discipling their kids? I think that's a good place for us to start.
Yeah, so boy, that's a loaded question
Yeah.
because I think a job description of a mom, often you think of like the busyness of motherhood and what that entails, but then there's the sliding from the physical to the mental pieces and all of those things. But in the area of that, I just think it's so much. I can sum it up in one word as far as the journey with our kids is sometimes it just is the unknown. And I think of my own journey as a mom, as a newborn baby coming home from the hospital. And I was super young when I had my baby. And I remember getting home and saying, oh my gosh, there's no manual. There's not anything or anybody telling me what to do. And I've always had people in my life. I had a great mom and, I saw a lot of modeling happening in my life. And then, a toddler, a mom can feel exhausted in that season of the doing and the cleaning up the same mess 5,000 times over and over. And then we slide to the elementary where you're then, they're meeting friends. Who are their friends? Who's their teacher? Who's imparting wisdom to them? Is it the right things that they're imparting? Yeah. And then if we're not careful, our worry needs to be replaced with on our knees. Of we're really seeking the Lord for wisdom, for friends. I can remember so many times, even at the elementary school, just let my kiddo have godly friends or people with like-mindedness. And I know that that's a huge thing. And when they make poor friend choices, what that looks like and how we can help them unpack that. And then we move into the middle school, age of being a mom. And that really starts the mental journey that we go through, where they're trying to figure out who they are. And it's awkward and it's quirky. And it's one day they like baseball and the next day they like skateboarding. I remember, my oldest going through that whole skateboard. And I thought, oh, dear Jesus.
I had a phase too.
Yeah, dear Jesus. It was like we had to have the gear. We had to have the look. And then, and then the idols that they follow were not necessarily the idols that I really wanted them to. And so there's all of that. And I think now looking back, I'm 53. So I have obviously adult kids, and that's a whole nother show. But, that adult kid of just really focusing on what's important. And I think, there's always these seasons that you go through that, that majoring on the minors kind of thing. And looking back, I feel like even though in the midst of all those seasons of motherhood, from baby on up through high school and even college, of where you're feeling like those things are major, but looking back, you begin to see the hand of God and the faithfulness of God in all of the things that really felt major. And I would just encourage every mom that if you're in a season like that, he's going to see you through. And you feel like it's going to be forever. I mean, bringing a baby home from the hospital, you feel like sleepless nights are forever.
Yeah.
They're not forever. Middle school season, it's not forever. Trying on all those identities and all those interests, it's not forever. But I remember being in those seasons where feeling like I'm never going to come out of this. And that can be a very grueling time and phase. As far as, the job, back to the job description, Charles, that you were talking about, and just discipling our kids, the definition of disciple is a person who is a pupil or a student of another. Mm-hmm. So when I think of the word disciple and discipling our kids, I think of modeling. Yeah. The more we can model what it looks like to be a Christian, to be a follower of Christ, and what those things hold. And a lot of times they're just character attributes. Right. They're just integrity, walking through things integriously. Yeah. They're following the Lord in practices that we do. So church attendance, things like that. Coming into the habit of doing those things, and not just church attendance, but where mom is the same at church as she is at home. We're living in a society where kids want the real deal.
Yes.
And they can spy out a fake in a hot minute. Yes. And so I think as parents and as moms especially, they are looking for that guide piece in our lives to show us what it looks like to be a Christian. Do we have a devoted time where we're spending time in the Word? That's important for them to not just know about, but to see. Times where we are in a situation maybe that it is a little bit crisis mode. Do we slide into worry mode, or do we say, hey, we're going to pray about this? What are we modeling? I think about modeling right relationships when we don't agree on things, or when we have an argument or a fight. How does that look like? And mainly the repair piece, because when we're practicing the repair in our homes of, wow, I blew it. I don't know how many times I've told my kids that. I blew it. I can remember with my firstborn.
You tell them that after a situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I blew it. And you know what? Kids are very resilient to that. Yeah. And they can appreciate that and learn to respect that of where, hey, I'm not perfect. Yeah. I think a lot of times we think we've got to be this perfect mom or this perfect parent. Yeah. And statistics show us, when you're talking about connected parenting and parenting in your home, if you do it 30% of the time, your kiddo is going to be okay.
That gives
and that's very, very encouraging. That's very, very encouraging.
Very freeing.
Yeah. And then when I think of the word disciple, so the modeling piece of our job description, and then there's the discipline, because that's also a piece that we have to do. And I think often we confuse, moms in particular, dads too, but we confuse that word discipline to mean punishment when discipline really means to teach. And so again, how do we learn best? We learn best by watching someone else do it, and then in turn we pass along the attributes and the traits that we're really wanting to see, and that also can help other people enjoy our kids. Yeah. I think those are really, really important pieces to kind of break down.
That was really big what you did. I think we need to just go back to that statement for a second.
Okay.
The punishment discipline thing.
Yeah.
That was really big. So you're saying that oftentimes parents confuse discipline with punishment.
Yes.
So then what's because obviously you got to punish sometimes, right? So what's the role for punishment? How do you kind of, in those situations occur, you still be able to model, like you're saying, still be able to use those as learning moments, and not allow it to just solely be punishment? Like what is...
Yeah. Well, I think if you really, big picture wise, what are we always after? we're after connection with our kids, because especially in those middle school, because there's this drift that begins to happen.
Yeah.
You know, they become more independent. They want to do things on their own. They want you to allow them to do things on their own, right? All these things that kind of come into play. But when we're talking about connection, and when we're talking about creating punishment versus teaching, again, the end result is that they teach. You know, behavior modification is really big in our society. You know, if I create a consequence for a specific behavior, then the goal would be that it not be repeated. Brain science has proven that to be not true.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's the piece. So there's this neuroscience that comes with kind of the background of this. But what I like to tell moms and what I like to tell parents just in working with them is that ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to impose on my child, whether it's a punishment or whether it's a, you know, we like to say timeout, or we like to say we're grounding you, or we like to send you to your room, is what I'm about to do or say or implement with my child, is that going to cause us to come closer together, or is it going to cause a distance between us?
That's good.
And if the answer is a distancing between us, then that's really not what we're after.
No.
Wow.
You know, we like to tell a 2-year-old, for example, go sit in that chair. You're going to time out. You go think about what you did and why you did it. One, that child does not have the capability to do that. So that's really a silly thing. I like to really impose, really a better tool to use is what we call a time in, where we're doing life side by side, even at 2 years old, where we're maybe not unpacking it at a 2-year-old level, but we're waiting until that moment where we're regulated and we're ready to be connected. And so the whole terminology of connect before you correct really comes into play here, where we're able to connect with our child with right where they're at. I think the danger becomes when we're talking about behavioral things for our kids and with our kids, the danger becomes when we stop being curious about the why behind behaviors we're seeing, especially if it's a repetitive behavior. You know, and those can be disrespect, a hate of school, I don't want to get up in the morning, all of those things. Like, if we stop being curious as a mom about why our kiddos are doing what they're doing, then I think that's when we have, there's actually a term for it. It's called blocked care, where we stop, and then neurologically even, it's a mechanism that we have as a mom to even protect ourselves because of those on and on behaviors.
And what would you recommend for moms who might find themselves in that space where they just feel like, I'm not able to deal with this anymore, or they recognize as they're listening to you that perhaps they're in that place of that blocked care?
Yeah. So I think
It's
awareness.
a hard place.
Yeah, it's a hard place to be, but I think, you know, it's that aware piece that we have to be self-aware of what we bring to the table. You know, often anything parenting really is more to do with us as a mom than it is about our child. Right. You know, how we react, how we overreact, how we underreact, you know, all of those things is really about training ourselves to kind of know these things. And so I would just encourage you, be a student of it. You know, anything that I've ever struggled with in being a mom, I've become a student of. Yes. And the more knowledge we can get and the more we can practice, and it takes practicing. You know, often I'll say, you know, I'll work with a mom and a mom will say, well, I tried that and it didn't work. Well, unfortunately, motherhood is not just trying it once. It's trying things over and over and over again and using different tools until you find the ones that do work. But again, the secret sauce is connection.
Yes.
As long as I have connection with my kids, we can conquer anything.
Wow.
And with multiple children, sometimes there is no one-way solution because what works for one may not work for all of them.
Yes. With the idea of connection, I mean, that goes any kid.
Right.
Across the board. That's really huge.
Great advice.
Yeah.
So keeping the conversation going. So now looking at, you got 3 sons and one daughter. So when you're looking at from a mom, and then the difference between discipling and disciplining a daughter compared to a son, anything that really stands out that you think mom should know, or is it really like, actually across the board it's the same, or there's some distinctives that you think are important and helpful that you've learned?
Yeah, well, if my kids were sitting here, they'd probably have very different stories. And I was thinking about this question because you guys were so gracious to kind of give me some bullets. But, I really think it's not so much a male-female thing, but I definitely think birth order plays a really big piece in kind of how we've parented them and, how much they get away with. So to speak. So, when I'm looking at my oldest, that firstborn, you're really practicing and you really want everything to be perfect. Yeah. And I can remember even as a teenager, me telling poor Tyler, like, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Because there were so many things that it's the first, it's the first boatload of wisdom that you're needing. And you don't always get it right. And then, there's the second born. I think they tend to get away with a little bit more, mainly because you're tired. You're tired because of all the energy and effort you put into trying to make that first one perfect. And, we had boy, girl. And then I think my boys would probably say we were a lot easier on Emily. Yeah. But she had a lot of firstborn too, because she was the only girl. So if you've read any birth order kind of material, you'll know kind of, and the age span between them and all that matters when taking into account. But she was the baby, too. So for the baby, you tend to do more for them. They don't have to be as independent, various things like that. And then there's a whole lot of gap between the last. I have a middle schooler now, and but he's acted almost like an only child. So I think all those dynamics really go into play at how you discipline, how you disciple even. It just really looks different. But I think birth order has more, in my opinion, why we do what we do rather than the sex of the child.
Yeah.
So how is the discipling changed, would you say? I've heard Pastor Stan talk about gathering everybody around the table and how frustrated he would feel because they would want to play. Or,
yes. How
has that changed from when you had the older kids and to now with your youngest?
Well, I would just say anybody that has ever done family devotions, my biggest piece of advice there is to have the bar really low.
Yes.
If you have the bar really low, if you set the bar really low, if it raises a little, you're going to be pleasantly surprised. And so it's really more about, I feel like family devotions is not so much the content, which I think every parent sets out to be like, oh, this is the moment. This is going to be awesome. We've planned it all and it's going to be great. And we learned really quickly not even to call it that.
Yes.
So that was the first thing.
Great.
It was just
great
like
advice.
A time before bed, that we were just going to kind of recount the day. And so we never called like, come for the family devotion. Like for some reason that just made it all go downhill. How has it changed? Again, I don't think you put all your apples in one basket.
Right.
So I don't, and if you're out there and you're a mom and maybe, typically we've been taught like the man is supposed to lead those family devotions. And for us, it was always kind of a joint thing. And I think that kind of debunks the pressure to feel like you've got to perform or have it all right. But I would just say don't put all your apples in that particular basket. I go back to the modeling. What it looks like, because again, that can just be something we check off a list where it really doesn't have a lot of discipleship meaning.
Right. And if you're a new believer, like you're a new mom and a new believer, what advice would you give a new mom about discipling her children?
Yeah. So if you're a new mom and a new believer all at the same time, one of the greatest resources that you can buy is a illustrated children's Bible.
Yes.
and work through that, not work through it, but read it with your child, because it's twofold. You're learning stories that you probably never learned, and they're being passed along to your child. So you're almost jointly doing it. But a children's Bible, and then when you're finished with one, you buy another one, because there's a boatload of them out there, and they really break things down into a simple way to understand. And we live in a very resourced world. Yes. So there's stuff out there.
That's great. There's a lot of those. I always love those Mommy and Me devotionals for girls. They make one for boys, and even those on a simple level. I learned a lot with my children. Through those little resources.
And I can't think of particularly the name for them, but they do have these journals that you now would be great for like an elementary student and even middle and high. You know, I had boys, and so boys, how was your day? It was good. That's all. So sometimes boys have a hard time kind of communicating feelings, different things like that. And so they have these journals out that are like, mom fills it out, and then you hand it to your kiddo, and they fill it out, and then you kind of talk about it. And it really does bring this great connection piece. I wish I could think of the name of it, but if you Google that, if you Amazon Google that,
we'll try to
you will find it. Yeah.
In our show
that'd
notes.
be great. That'd be great.
That's cool. And I want to kind of before moving on, stay on the daughter-son thing for one more minute. Hopefully this question makes sense. I'm kind of trying to process it in my mind, but it's again thinking about son and a daughter from a mom. Like, are there specific things that you were trying to be intentional about? Time, again, you said time in and walking them in and inviting them into specific maybe traits or attributes or things that you, again, looking at your daughter, you really just felt like as the mom, you really wanted to highlight this with her and develop her in this and really invite her into these moments of your life compared to your sons when you really wanted to develop them and maybe, you get what I'm asking, invite them into that compared to what the father might be doing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, obviously choices are you want them to make good choices. So friend choices, various things like that. And so I think relationally, you know, girls are all kind of intertwined, and sometimes it can be a little bit of drama, you know, in regards to friendships and things like that. And so really allowing her to, especially early, you know, early in our just the beauty that a friendship can have and what a friendship can look like and should look like, you know, the give and take piece. And so spending a little bit of time on just what constitutes a good friend and, you know, thinking particularly of Emily. And she went to a small Christian school. And so things were kind of close. Either you liked kids or you didn't care for kids, right? And so kind of working through kind of those pieces and parts, but giving her that foundation of kind of what to look for in a friend were important things for me to kind of speak into her life. And you know, the boys, you know, the boys of just making, you know, really good choices. I think, you know, one of the questions you all had asked is, you know, do you ground kids or keep youth group or youth events? For us, that was never an option, not because we're in ministry, really, because even if we weren't pastoring, I think this would be our MO, Stan and my MO. We felt it pertinent that no matter what season we were in, and there were seasons with the boys that it could have been very easy for us to say, you know, just don't go.
Yeah.
Many rough seasons, especially middle and high school, was a rough season for. In fact, it's a season that I don't even know all the details. To this day, I've told them, do not tell me the details. I don't want to know the details. I don't want to know the people. I don't want to be an accomplice, like nothing going through things. But we felt pertinent, and I think it's very, very important to continue. I'm going to use the word make.
Yeah.
Because it's that important. I think about Tyler's life, and I think about where he was as a high schooler, and we sent him on a missions trip. He did not want to go on that missions trip, and it was on that missions trip. This wasn't even a youth service. This was a missions trip where God got a hold of his life And from that moment on, he was never the same.
Wow.
Never the same kid. And he was involved in a lot of stuff. And I think he would be okay with me sharing that. A lot of stuff. And I just think allowing them to be in community with other believers and leaders, primarily leaders. I'm going to kind of drop the leader mark here of the importance of just being a leader, a consistent leader in kids' lives. That over and over, that didn't grow weary of their stuff, but that just tenaciously loved on them and cared for them and prayed for them and more than anything, met them where they were. Because I know a lot of times there can be expectations, and this isn't just in ministry homes, expectations of how kids should behave or should act or what they should be involved in and what they shouldn't. And I think a lot of times if we discount what we see instead of what's inside of them, which is a desire, we were all created with this hole in our heart for Jesus that only he could fill. So I'm a huge advocate for get them in positions where they can respond to the gospel.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so youth group allows them to. So for the boys, it's those pieces.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. That's huge. Even just going off of church and kind of a little more of a practical question, but obviously, sports are a thing, extracurriculars are a thing, traveling is a thing, having, some parents who are really busy, like Sundays could be that only time they feel like they can have that personal connection time with their kids. So just going off of this church specifically, I mean, how do you speak into that as a mom? Like, how do you balance that? Is it wrong to miss Sundays for baseball? Is it wrong to plan vacation? Like, how do you speak into to those sides?
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit about this and kind of going back 20 years or so, and we didn't always do this well, but I do think we came up with things we would do and things we weren't going to do. It became, my middle son actually played college basketball, and I think so it was a passion for him.
Yeah.
And really a calling. Like we still to this day, we can't see Zach doing anything other than what he's doing, in a gym with a clipboard. I mean, like we can't. And so some of this was really saying, what has God got for my kid's life? And I think society as a whole, we're all after the scholarships and and I don't even want to give the percentages, but it's not many that are going.
Right.
It's not many that are going. And so I think that kind of helps you to make harder choices. With Zach, he played AAU ball, but not till he could drive. And partially because we weren't able to really get him there on a Sunday. I mean, we did have grandparents that helped and various things like that. But for him, we just made a compromise to where he might miss some Sundays, but he wasn't missing Wednesday nights. Right. We just began to put things in place that kind of worked for our home, but without diminishing dreams.
That's awesome. Wow.
I think that's the key, because you don't want to diminish that, and you also don't want church to be the enemy.
Yeah.
Especially in our home, because we were here all the time, early on, and so we didn't want it to be this enemy, but we did want to know that it was a priority, and so the priority might have looked different for different seasons, but I do know that you can get out of a rhythm. So baseball comes, but baseball goes.
Right.
So staying in the rhythm of making church a priority, making youth group a priority, making, that's where I always wanted my kids' best friends to be, is in community, and church was our community.
That's really good.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm inspired listening to that. I love that. Because again, like the stigma is like, prioritize church. You can't do it. Don't compromise. If you give in to basketball, you know what I mean? Like, that's so the stigma that we get, and what a pressure that puts in. But you're so right in that. You lose sight of the fact that these are your kids. They got dreams. They got callings. They got to grow. They got to chase. So I love what you're saying, Angie. Like, that is so, I hope y'all caught, like, that is so powerful. Man, that's really, really good. That's awesome. So just two kind of summary closing questions we want to throw your way. Okay. The first one specifically, and I'll ask this on behalf of my wife. Okay. We got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, one coming in July. But speaking specifically to that toddler season of life that I know you miss once you're out of it. But when you're in it, it's tough. Like, what's just like one piece of advice if you could go back and tell Angie of 20 years ago when she was in that season, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to play more.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
I really would. And I would tell her to play more because it goes so stinking fast.
I feel a little teary.
I
listening.
know.
That got me.
No. Play more.
I would play more because one day,
so
because
good.
the day will come when they don't want to play.
Yeah.
You know, but you do have this gift of grandkids. And that's amazing. And so I'm doing a whole lot of playing now. The other thing I would, this is something that I learned way later, but this whole idea of nurture and structure, I just want to hit on that a little bit because it's super important. A lot of times we have this natural bent. We're either more of a nurturer or we are a person that likes a whole lot of structure. You know, when I say play more, like my idea of playing was dumping a bucket of Legos on the floor and then I start organizing by color. That was my idea of play. So I've gotten much better at playing over the years. But I say that to say we have this natural bent. We're either more ooey gooey, huggy wuggy, or we're more like, this is what we're going to do and we're going to do it now, and more of a structured
From
parent.
9 to 9:30.
Absolutely. More of a structured parent. And I would just say and encourage you that kids need 100% of both. They need 100% nurture from you, and they need 100% structure. And the reason why is if we only give our kiddos nurture and we don't give them the structure pieces, they're not going to grow effectively.
Wow.
And when we only give structure and we don't provide the emotional support that our kids necessarily need, again, 100%, then they're not going to trust us. And so, again, I learned this way later. So, but unfortunately, we don't get a redo. And I just want to encourage moms out there too. Like, if you've listened to this and you're like, golly, I feel like I'm doing this all wrong. You are not. Right. You know, we can't change what happened yesterday. We can make sense of it. And put it in its right perspective and choose today to connect with our kids. It's never too late. And nothing that we go through is wasted.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. You want to ask her our last question? Close this up, Pastor Brandy.
Which last question would you like me to ask? I have a whole list of questions.
Last one on the list.
The very last one. All right. What's one thing you think every mom should know as they are on this discipleship journey with their kids? What's one last thing they should know?
Yeah. So I probably got two things. It's always going to feel like a roller coaster. Yeah. It's always going to feel like a roller coaster because it is. It's this highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. Good changing. Seasons, flat seasons, happy seasons, sad seasons, angry seasons, frustrating seasons. It's just this roller coaster of emotions. But you will always be the one who has the greatest influence in their life.
Wow.
No matter what this world tells you, you will always be the greatest influencer in their life. There will be times you don't feel like that. And don't allow someone to take that role without a fight for it. But you will always be their greatest influencer.
Man, you're pumping me up. I want to go love my kids right now. Come on. No one's going to take them from me. You said you had two. What was the second thing?
No, I think that was it. That
was great.
Yeah.
Man.
That's good.
Well, thank you so much, Angie. I mean, I know you got a lot of things going on, so thanks for taking the time to go over this and be a part. And I know all you guys listening, thanks for listening. Share this with your friends. Again, we do this for Cloverhill Church, but I mean, y'all know moms. Y'all know this can benefit a lot of people. And so share it. Thank you again. Next month, we'll be pumped to have Pastor Stan talk about the dad side of things. So that'll be really exciting.
I may listen into that.
It should be good. But thank you guys for listening.
And happy